So many of the people who have created Voltron and all of its various iterations. And I'm so excited to be here now speaking with one of the creators of the original Voltron Defender of the universe, producer Steve Sterling. Please welcome Steve. Welcome. It's great to meet you. We've been privileged through the podcast and here at VoltCon actually to have spoken with Frank Lakoff previously. And it's exciting to have you here. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm humbled to be here.
Yeah, so
it's really humbling.
I know that you had some material that you might want to show, or do you want to just launch it?
Well, I was asked, and I have to say I'm really grateful to be here, and just it's so great to see how there's such a core people of keeping the passion alive for Voltron. It's really it's very humbling. It's one of the top 5 career experiences I've had in my entire career, and I was asked to. I'm prepared to talk about some of the other things I did sort of before and after Voltron. So I, made a little PowerPoint. You can tell me what's interesting or not. Or
I'm sure it's all interesting.
Nobody cares about any of that. But so I just kind of flashed through some stuff, and happy to talk about any of that as well. But when I get to the end, it's my role here. I feel is I'm probably not going to be the best person to talk to everybody about some of the deeper folklore of Voltron, but I can go very, very deep into how it was it all came together from a production standpoint and what we all did to make it happen, and what we had no idea what was going to happen from it. But there were certain things that we did decide along the way that we thought were really going to distinguish Voltron. So I'll just run through some of this stuff. And,
Please do.
See, I was born in a little town in central Pennsylvania. My parents moved to west of Philadelphia in my high school years. Went to college at Marquette University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and then went on to New York and started there at ABC Television Network, just as a lowly clerk, and sort of worked my way up. But then went over to ABC Sports and then switched over to ABC News. But oddly enough, when I went out of college, I wanted to be in entertainment. Being in Pennsylvania, New York was closer, so I went to New York, and it never occurred to me that in New York, it's all really news and sports. It wasn't, other than soap operas, there wasn't much entertainment. So I missed my landing and had to really reconcile it. I needed to go to Los Angeles if I wanted to really be in entertainment. So I worked my way through and ultimately made my way out to Los Angeles and was fortunate enough to get different jobs. When I was at ABC Television, I was ultimately ended up head of worldwide operations for ABC Sports, which was a crazy job. I only got the job because the guy who had the job got so burned out he just left the company, and I didn't know enough when they said, "Do you want to take that job?" I was like, "Oh yeah!" So they burned me out too. But anyways, it became my escape to LA. And because of that, though, I had a bit of a reputation or a lot of experience in post-production, and a lot of the ways you could take something and make it, what we're doing at ABC Sports, we're editing things, we're doing live stuff. So anyways, out in LA, I really got, I was able to, oh, sorry about that. Did anybody see anything? Hold on. Bear with us 1 minute. If it doesn't come up from here,
We're experiencing technical difficulties.
I'm
Please
very
stand
familiar
by.
with technical difficulties. I just don't know how to solve them. As a technical aid, anyway. Something's happening here. Voila.
Yay!
So let me rewind all the way. So I was born in a small town in let me get this on the slideshow here. There we go. Anyways, this was the part about ABC Sports. You heard that part. I won't go through that again. I went to LA, got involved in all these different shows and different projects, and it was really beginning to try to move my career along. One of the things that I did is I created a cartoon character. I always wanted to be in animation. I loved it as a kid. I had created this great, amazing, incredible story and character called Sharpie the Guardian Sage. It was amazing. It was based on, I don't know if you ever saw the Sharpie dog. It had all the folds on it and stuff. And Sharpie had a magical medallion. He could solve problems and stuff. And I just think this is the greatest thing ever. And so anyways, I went around LA. I was pitching my guts out and I couldn't get arrested. I mean, nobody, you know, it was, but funnily enough, a guy that, you see the one thing you asked for was a show, one of the executives from there who had been at CBS Network, very high-ranking guy, very successful, and he had split off and he was in the business now of syndication, syndication meaning you take shows, sort of independent shows can be sold to TV stations individually. And he was very successful at that, and we had crossed paths there. And so he was one of the people I pitched Sharpie the Golden Sage to. So he called me and said, you know, we really don't like your Sharpie the Golden Sage thing, but we have another project that we're very involved in called Voltron. And I had no idea what that was, and I said, is it an animated series? Yeah, and I said, I'm in, great. So I went, I had the great good fortune of interviewing with Ted Koppler. Ted, I think you all know the story. In a way, sort of unlikely, was an innovator. He was a visionary out of St. Louis. His father had a TV station there, and Ted was innovating at the TV station locally. So this was a guy who, and Bob will speak to it later, in my view, when I crossed paths with him, was an unlikely character in Hollywood, had a vision for something. He and Peter Keith had come from the TV station, and they were on a mission. They saw something. And I'm going to speed through the rest of my stuff and go all the way back to Voltron, and you and I can really take off from there. Because we'll just so this is my. I'll be right back to Voltron in a minute. I was always interested in technology, entertainment technology, anything about technology. I got very involved in an invention for the State Department, a security invention, took a totally left turn out of there. Got myself back in entertainment, worked with Sony Music, and was in a development position there. We launched a lot of different shows, Live by Request, a live call-in request show where music artists would come in, they'd be live and people could call in and talk to them and then request songs. We did like 24 episodes and really major names, Phil Collins, and it was very interesting because no music artist really wanted to be live with their fans. So we said it's not stump the band, and the reality is in 2 hours we can only get 20 people in. Well, we had a call director with 20 phone lines coming in. So we were averaging like 1,200,000 calls in. So in the first seconds, we had all 20 people lined up. So we were interviewing people on the phone, and you guys, well, I want to talk to Phil, say, okay, you're not going to make it into the show. So we were producing the phone calls coming into the show, and we knew what songs we were going to get. Then they talked to the artists. It was really fantastic. It was Emmy nominated. Live by Request, that was, and then I went on to Sessions at West 54th and PBS. I really got into music. I can't hum, I can't read a note of music, I can't play an instrument, but I had a really nice run in the music business. And the thing I loved about music was it's all about passion, it's all about storytelling. Yeah, there's a lot of egos because a lot of money gets involved, but my stock and trade was I would do rights deals. So I would get involved with different artists, and I was the guy who would do TV deals for them, video deals or web or wireless deals. And I sort of kept on to that. I went with an independent company. We did Up in Smoke. I don't know if you know of that, but that was that's again right up there with my top 5 things with Voltron, with Dr. Dre and Eminem. It was really fantastic. A lot of other music things that I got involved in. Went over to a company called Live Nation. Worked with the Rolling Stones and Mariah Carey and a bunch of others, and was always basically putting their deals together. So even though they were making hundreds of millions of dollars and doing concerts, the truth is they wanted television home video because that was going to last longer than any concert they ever did. Mm-hmm. So my business was sort of the legacy business, right? I was in doing rights deals, so I would have meetings with Mick Jagger and Keith, and they'd want to know what I was going to do, or Mariah Carey, and she was very onto her business, by the way, for all the other craziness you could hear about her. But I also had a passion for documentaries. I did a documentary with Pete Seeger And when I was pitching that documentary, and I would pitch it to people and say, I got a documentary on Pete Seeger, and they go, oh yeah, the Silver Bullet Band, right? Like, no, that's Bob Seger. And I knew that was not my person right there. Pete is amazing. If you know anything about him, check it out. A real artist. He was an environmentalist. He was a patriot. He was blacklisted way back in the day, known as a folk singer. He's the person who made me realize the difference between an artist and an entertainer. And he was somebody that you could be an artist, and many people are, but when you start getting paid money, you become an entertainer. And Pete was very militant about this idea that he never, when he signed a contract to perform, he made them black out what he was going to get paid. When he signed his tax return, he never wanted to know how much money he had. He would sign it, but he always knew that in his mind, as soon as it's an infectious thing, that once you start getting into what am I getting paid for this, it suddenly becomes what am I getting paid for this? And he never wanted to spoil the sense of art for what he was getting paid. A very interesting dynamic, and that to me made me realize the difference between an artist and an entertainer. And I worked with many entertainers who are true artists. I don't want to take that away from them, but very exciting, crazy times with all of them. You can talk about that anytime you want.
Was this another of your top 5 experiences?
With Pete?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that was like that in the heart and soul category of one of the top 5. Just being with him, and he's unfortunately passed away, but was really great. I then really realized that I wanted to be much more entrepreneurial. I by nature was more entrepreneurial, was very into technology, so I got involved in a lot of other sort of tech startups. We were selling virtual goods for avatars 12 years ago, and nobody cared that. We had a deal with Microsoft Xbox Live Avatar Marketplace where we were selling. I licensed from Kiss, I licensed from Walking Dead, I did all these license deals with different intellectual properties and brands, and then we would make these little tiny digital shirts that people could buy and put on their avatars. Very odd at the time. That company, through that company, I was a co-inventor of 2 software patents, neither of which have made me any money. We sold that company to another company, not good people. The company went under, and we couldn't get any of our rights back, so it was it's a long lost, sad story. And then I just kept doing other things. I'd get rights to other TV shows, other shows, live shows. I was much more focused on live because music on TV MTV wasn't even playing music on TV anymore. So I went past that and got involved with a wide range of things. Now I'm very involved with a company called Base Hologram. We're doing hologram concerts. We did Mariah Carey and Whitney Houston, Maria Callas, Roy Orbison, Buddy Holly, and we replicate them in hologram form and put them up on screen. They're very lifelike, very realistic. So we're now delivering in 4 weeks a hologram dinosaur show to the Houston Museum of Natural Science. So, and when you see these things, they're very realistic. You take a picture of yourself in front of it, and it looks like you're standing there with, a dinosaur or a person. So the professional organizations, I feel strongly about that. Whatever all you are doing and whatever you do, join your professional organization for whatever your profession is, because that's another place like this. The community comes together. There's a community there. In my case, it was the Grammy organization, the Academy of Television Arts and Sciences, and you can say, ooh, they're big, but they're made up of grassroots people. They have chapters in lots of cities and stuff, and they live on their membership. So whatever you do and wherever there is, this is a membership community right here in a way in itself, because everybody shows up for Voltron. So anyway, so back to why we're here. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you for being here. It's a blast.
I just wanted to say a couple of things, and then I'll hush up and
please
respond to you. But I think most people know a lot about Voltron. You're here, and thanks to you. And what I got to say, a big thank you to Kevin and Patrick, because they carry this thing on their shoulders for us all. It's very interesting what all went on. And Kevin, by the way, gave a fantastic master class on sort of the history, the backstory. It was like, it's suitable for college course, if you ask me. But I think some of the interesting things that were going on, which will lead me to sort of what Ted and Peter Keefe sort of came upon and took off with, out of Japan, when they were it was manga or mangate, which was basically, this form of art, this comic book art at the time. Nobody was animating it yet. And then animation became anime or anime. And so then they sort of were calling it, mecha anime, which was mechanical stuff. And these wild, crazy things that they were coming up with were sort of very culturally specific, right? It was right there. The folks at Toei Animation, which is where this Voltron really came from, were really seizing upon it. This company had been around since 1948, so they were doing a lot of stuff. In a way, they were, I won't say they were the Disney of the time, but they were right out there in Japan in that sort of world. And they had this particular concept that Voltron was born from was always attributed to a person's name, which is up there. It's I'm going to read it here. It's Yamade, and that was a name that the Toei Animation people, rather than putting all the names up on the screen, they made a pseudonym for the creators of it, and they put them all under one name, a pseudonym. So Voltron is sort of accredited as a concept from this one name, but it was really a bunch of people inside Toei Animation that came up with it. And lo and behold, Ted, who was innovating programming in St. Louis at their TV station, knew that there was a bigger world out there to be had. And again, I will defer to Bob on a lot of this. But when I came to know Ted, he and Peter Keefe had already acquired the rights. They made a deal with Toei Animation to acquire the rights to an existing series. They're in Los Angeles. All the craziness of Los Angeles is going on, all the egos of Los Angeles. And when I came upon them, they were very behind schedule. I was by this guy, Tom Batista, who sadly has also passed away, was sort of brought into the scene. Can you talk to these guys? Because I was a post-production professional at that point. And they were behind schedule, and it was really scary because this whole thing with, you miss your schedule on television, you're pretty much gone. And so the pressure was on, and we got talking. I was like, I was going to do it no matter what. I don't care if they paid me or not, because it's like it's an animated project. I'm in. And but they had seen something, and everybody in Los Angeles was, these guys from St. Louis, they're going to do the Japanese overdub retread, and it was, I don't know if they were laughing at it per se, but they had no expectations for it. And the thing that everybody had done, if they did anything at all, was take these foreign shows, basically get the scripts that those people had written, get voiceover actors to just, recite what it was and fit it in the voice and send it off. And for the rest of us that were watching, there was always a mismatch. And a lot of things got decided about Voltron that were, I think, really made it what it was. And a couple of those things were, we weren't going to just take those scripts and rewrite them or revoice them. We were going to actually write things that we could tell stories with. And Peter set off with all the encouragement and support from Ted to begin to create a story. I was able to see in these scenes, right? Like everything has a number of scenes and a number of characters. So once you look at that as an inventory, you can sort of say, well, we can tell any story we want. One of the things that I had known from being in sports, where they had slow motion machines at the time, where you could sort of go forwards and backwards. All animated characters originally only say A, E, I, O, U. That's the mouth formation for a character.
The phonemes, or is that what they call it?
Exactly, yeah. And so I knew that if we took some of these scenes with these slow motion machines, we could take the characters and we could make them talk faster or slower. We didn't get as far into that as I had intended because the pressure on the deadline were so strong. But those things we were able to do is we decided that we weren't going to do a cartoony animation sound, which was that sort of like, whoa, and everybody had these sort of over-exemplified things. We were going to do characters who were really going to express themselves and say things because they were on a mission to do something. And so these are some of the things that really began to shape Voltron and distinguish Voltron. That Ted and Peter knew they had something they could make different. The animation came from Japan, no question about it. We were sort of cutting it up and moving it around to tell the stories that we could tell. Originally, the original writers on Voltron were very storied writers, and they were long-lasting, legendary writers, but they were sort of old-style guys. I say that lovingly. And we even in the case of Princess Allure, I remember being in a mixing room late 4 in the morning and hearing, Princess Allure being a little bit of a screamy, helpless, female character. And we were like, no, because what we were beginning to see in the ratings was that back then the robotic superhero genre was coming to American television. So a lot of young kids, boys, were coming to school and saying, oh, did you see this or did you see that? And the girl didn't really have anything. He-Man was there. And so we knew that if we could make Princess Allura more of a featured character, we could be more inclusive. And that made a huge difference in the ratings, and that really took us to a #1 rating position. So I'm just rattling along about different things that we were doing, in there, not knowing what we were going to do or what was going to come of it, but because of Ted and because of Peter, they were going to do something different, and that's what got it going. So that concludes my monologue.
Okay. So I just want you all to know that I prepared a long list of questions, and I believe Steve answered about 80%.
I'm sorry.
I'm so
I
glad.
rehearsed too much. I read all your questions. I just figured, what the heck, I'll spare you and I'll answer
I should have
them.
just sat down because you did such a wonderful job. I'm not worthy. But going back to post-production, I'm just going to wing it from here on out, because if I try to read my own crummy handwriting, this is just going to go south.
I didn't mean to spoil your
No, that's once upon a time. No, honestly, in post-production, one of the things I noticed is that you produced more of the Go Lion based episodes than Franklin Kofod had, and he had produced more of the vehicle shows than you had. And one of the distinguishing characteristics about Lion versus Vehicle is that Lion had pretty much an entirely original soundtrack. Some of the sounds were lifted from Go Lion, but nowhere near as many as was done with Die Rugger. Do you recall whether any of that was a conscious decision, or if there was some kind of a technical reason, or?
It was a conscious decision. It was again more about how original can we make this, it was. It was wonderful and terrorizing all at the same time, because when you pull it apart and when you watch something now, maybe you do see it. I don't know what people out of the business see, but when you pull this apart, we had the voices, which I do want to talk about because they were amazing, and that was an amazing experience for me. But you have every layer of something. You have sound effects. You have John Peterson, who wrote the music, wrote 110 music cues, and he scored them beautifully. They're arranged really wonderfully. He again brought something very, very unique to it all. But when you're scoring music for something like this, you say, okay, we need a tension cue. Okay, if you guys know music at all, what would that be? And how many tension cues? And we need, a little romance. We need, So you really you're describing in words scenes that you're going to be using, and you're trying to get a composer emotionally to convey that musically. So that was having an original soundtrack, and then the sound effects were. We got to a point where we said, why did we do this? Because it was a lot of sound effects, and you can, go too far with stuff and not know if it's really paying off or not. But one of the motivations was, I guess, sort of on the undercurrent of the audio side, was that this was the first stereo TV show ever. Network, name anything you want, anywhere. That was a selling point.
And not just animation.
Of all things. And again, Ted, he seized on something. He's a very smart guy, very clever guy, but he knew that if he could say to TV stations, and because TV stations were just allowed to go stereo, and we were like, well, what do we do with that? Who's got stereo TV shows? And sure enough, World Events Productions, it's going to say, we have one coming, 1984. It'll be fall '84. And so we knew that we needed to bring a dynamic to sound, because we were the first one out. It was intimidating, really, because nobody had done it before. And we were in a position to say, let's just kick the shit out of this. So we just brought everybody to it, sound effects editors. And I remember being in, as happens when you're doing these kind of shows, so we're in a mixing facility in LA, And you know, it's like this is where people, you know, record songs and big stuff, movies even, and they got big speakers like, you know, like the size of these lamps all over the place, and you're in there and you're just feeling really good about what you're hearing. And it's just like,
Speaking
wow.
of hearing, can everyone hear okay? Are we close enough to the mics?
Yeah.
Okay.
Should we have some sound effects? No. So we're in there, and you know, I'm listening to stuff. I think we're on like 3 episodes in or something, and you know, and we are hearing stuff like I'm hearing Princess Allura in big sound, being sort of screamy and a little helpless and whiny, and it's like, no, this really. So, but what went on then was I was like, you know what, we got to stop, and I told the sound department, I said, go get me like 2 9-inch oval speakers, like somebody would actually have in their house, and put them on the mixing console. And they were like, what? And I said, this is how, I want to hear how it's going to hear when it gets, how it's going to sound when it gets home. And oh, they were really not happy with me because they were so proud of this, you know, $1 million mixing facility. But every time we mixed something down, they would say, oh, Steve wants to hear it through his car speakers, you know. So we did, but I will contend to this day that that's part of our reality check of how was it going to sound at home. And so because we knew, and because Ted and Tom Batista was selling the show to stations, and Peter all knew that, you know, we were going to be looked upon as that first stereo anything. And part of it is, yeah, we could say, well, who even has a stereo TV right now? So, but the TV stations were advertising, you know, now in stereo, and so that began to that of course prompted the sale of stereo television speakers.
I've heard
So
stories.
anyway, the audio.
I've heard. I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut it,
Please do.
but I've heard stories that entertainment or companies that there are stores that would sell televisions would play Voltron to
Yeah.
give people a
Yeah.
sense of what that's
Yeah.
what it can sound like.
Yeah, so you can stand in front of it and hear left and right. Yeah. So it was. So audio was. I contend audio in every form. I mean, think about it. There's a layer of voices, which again I think we should talk about because that was incredible talent there. The music, John Peterson, the composer.
And Dale Shacker, I believe, as well.
Yes, thank you. And then, you know, a list of sound effects editors, which were just, you know, cutting up stuff and putting it in the right place at the right time. And I have to say, I can't overstate the brutal pressure of being so behind schedule. It was really, we went, I know for a fact, we went 33 days straight. And I think there was a period, we went 4 or 5 days, like all day, all night, just to, because we were only, the way it worked then, they would distribute to all the TV stations by satellite. This wasn't a network show. The network feeds it from New York or LA, and you know there are 200 stations all pick it up, you know, coming down the line. This was going to all these different TV stations, and they all had satellites. So we had to hit the satellite, and we were sometimes within 48 hours, and nobody liked that. You know, you can't deliver to a satellite feed facility. They would say they needed at least a week in advance, and we were, I would say we were 8 weeks into the series before we ever got delivered a week in advance. It really was like a few days. They hated us.
So according to the original air dates of the show, Defender of the Universe in most markets, it seems that the Lion episodes debuted first, and after the first maybe 7 or 8, there was a brief divergence into the vehicle team out of thin air. And then after a handful of those aired, it cut back to Lion and pretty much finished out the rest of the Lion run.
You were really exposing that we ran out of rail. We ran out of stuff. Because also stuff was coming from Japan. They weren't as organized as we would like, episodically speaking. And you want to get, you know, you got to get the materials. We always wanted to have the translated scripts just to know where they were going. And then basically we rejigged the writers. We brought in Mark Handler, was great, and we sort of, you know, really wanted to get more contemporary, and so that was where all of a sudden it was like, oh my God, we're running out of content to start doing it with, and that, you know, truth is we weren't really happy about that because it was sort of like, okay, where is all this going? But again, you know, Peter Keefe, he's an amazing guy, but I never envied him because he had to go home, in the midst of all of this going on, he still had to go home and say, okay, let's see, what should this character be called? You know, where's this person from? What's the backstory here? And, you know, story is everything, and character, depth of character is everything. We can all, you know, say all kinds of things, but if you don't have that, you really got nothing. And that's what makes it lasting.
Do you know how many of those decisions might have been made by Peter Keefe as opposed to the original head writer, Jameson Brewer, who might have come up with some of the names like Allura or Pidge?
Yeah, Jameson, I want to rattle it. Jameson, Cosmo Johnson, Howard Albrecht, I think Saul Weinstein.
Yes.
I want to be respectful about this because they were, when you look at, I would encourage you to go look at the names and go look at what they had done. Because if you were in LA and you said, I'm going to need a team of writers, not one, you're going to need a team because they're going to be writing, and Jameson was the head writer. So in that organization structure on anything now, TV series, the head writer is responsible for the overarching storyline, keeping it going, and then other writers either write scenes or episodes. In this case, they were episodes. They were assigned episodes and told, this is where you're going to tie together from the last episode and take it forward. And so it was their place in life and where they were. I don't want to say their age, but they were coming from a place that wasn't. They were fitting some of this into sort of an older approach to storytelling, because that's what they had succeeded at. They were very good at it. Mark came along. Peter started realizing, we need to be a little more contemporary about this and stuff. So although Jameson really, it's very interesting. I think Jameson really helped Ted, but Peter specifically understand, high stakes episodic story structure and continuity. And then once Peter picked it all up, then he wanted to put his thumbprint on it and really get it a little more contemporary. And that's what we were all feeling much better about. And even in that discussion about, the cartoony, sound of your whole soundtrack for the whole series, we liked the idea that we were going to be more dramatic and more straight out to kids, and we're going to talk down to them. And one of the interesting results of that was that we were finding through ratings that we were getting, the way it ran then, and still does really, is morning time, right before school, everybody's showing, the episodes for kids getting ready to school, or they're sitting around waiting to go to school, watching cartoons. After school, coming home after school, they rerun the episodes again. And we were finding through the ratings that we were getting a really good afternoon college audience.
Wow.
It was really, we were like, wow, this is great, because it was almost like it was anime, that was cool, nobody was doing it, so it caught college kids' eyes. But it was also a soundtrack that they didn't feel silly listening to, right? It was sort of, we were out there with it. They weren't listening, they did, whoa, kind of stuff. And so we were like, wow, this is so cool that we got college kids watching with us. That Tom Batista was doing ad sales and TV distribution stuff. We're like, Tom, this is really cool. And he goes, I can't do anything about that. We are selling, all of our sponsors are toy companies and kids products and stuff. There's no way I'm gonna find a way to find other sponsors for the afternoon shows to be targeting college kids. So we never got to take advantage of that, but it was, and I sort of feel it was always a badge of honor, because it was like, wow, we have like, older people that are really into the story and the characters.
That is fascinating, and certainly the unique look of the show and the unique sound design played huge parts in that.
Yeah.
I am curious, because the series was divided roughly half and half between yourself and Franklin. Did you guys interact very much, or did I think he was hired on first for the original pilots?
Yeah.
And so did the two of you collaborate early on about approaches, or did you start right out of the gate and you knew the approach you wanted to take?
Not so much. I mean, he was on a path. He was there at the beginning. I was this sort of add-on, and I think, to be honest, he probably would admit to, like, okay, who's this other guy they're bringing on? What does he know about anything? And but the call to action was so intense. We passed each other in the hallways, really, because our stories didn't really they didn't really cross paths, so we were connecting. And Peter was at the head of that. So Peter basically, everything came down from Peter to us, scripts and everything else. And so we would just take our scripts and go, I got to go make this right away. We were recording 3-4 shows a day, trying to catch up. Now you remember, we were just recording voice actors, and then that went, and we were editing our own shows. I mean, it's sort of interesting. can I keep digressing?
Please
I don't know
do.
if I-
This is not digressing.
I don't know
This
if
is
I'm going off the rails here or
fascinating.
not, so.
Please.
The,
Remember, I'm winging it, so there is no.
I am too. We'll wing it together. You know, part of what was going on was we were really trying to find a rhythm for everything. So, but early on, this is very early on, before we ever recorded the voice, there was a discussion for the pure economics of it, and to give this thing a chance to become commercially viable. We were told not to use any union anybody's, right? No union voice actors. I had been in the Directors Guild from my previous stuff, but we weren't going to do this as a Directors Guild, so we couldn't take credits as directors because we would then have the Directors Guild rates and stuff.
That's interesting because I've noticed Franklin Kofat's credit is produced and directed by, and yours is produced by, and is that the reason?
Yeah. Well, I was a DGA director. Now I want you to know I wasn't scabbing here. I did do this legitimately. At the DGA, you can go do a loan out deal, where even though you're a Directors Guild director, you can get permission from the guild to go do another show. They loan you out. They just pay you differently. But anyways, Franklin was not, so he could take a credit as director. I still to this day think, gosh, I never got the credit as a director. And the truth is, I shouldn't have been directing voice actors. And if I was a post-production person, I was in the DGA as a post-production supervisor, not as a director. I was incredibly intimidated at the idea that I was going to have to direct actors. I mean, I'd done some stuff where I was telling people what to do and stuff, but I can't tell you how much I was sweating in the very thing. But what's interesting, if you allow me, is so in the path of all that, even with voice actors, the discussion was, we're not going to use union voice actors, and I knew enough to know that, wow, it's, what kind of experience you're going to get with people that in LA, anyways, that didn't have credentials, weren't in the AFTRA, it's called the American Federation of TV and Radio Actors. What experience would they have if they weren't in a union? And so we auditioned. I said, okay, well, I'll start auditioning, non-union actors. And I went to Peter, and I think Ted was in that meeting too, and said, listen, I'd love to just have some union, some experienced voice actors come in, and let's see that they may, because they're experienced, they might save us time. For the money we'll have to pay them, they might save us time, and it might be worth knowing about. And so, all right, I'll check it out, because voice actors will come and audition for anybody, for anything, for nothing. They want to get the gig. So I had, I think, 3 different voice actors come in. We gave them what's called sides, which are just a few pages from a script and some characters and stuff. And they came and went. It wasn't that impressive. And one of the agents called and said, "Oh, what'd you think?" And I said, "Well, gee, I said, honestly, we're under a lot of pressure here to use non-union voice actors, and I wasn't that impressed. We're going to do like 125 episodes." And this agent said, 125 episodes? You never told me that. I'm going to send them back right away. And I was like, well, okay, great. Yeah, I got a studio, send them over. And what happens is, it's very interesting to me, is voice actors, think about it, they've only got so much range in their vocal cords, right? And so they're working in a mirror, creating characters with their voices, where can I go with my voice? How can I do this? Oh gosh, I can do this. And they're not gonna give you one of their characters for nothing. Or just for, a one-time only. They didn't know what the show was. Rumors were around Hollywood, oh, these guys are doing a Japanese overdub retread, God bless them. But when it was like, oh my gosh, 125 episodes, take your rate times 125 and the reciduals, it was like, you know what, I got a really good character for you. And these people came back and they just nailed it. I mean, you could, at a union day rate per episode, you could get, out of one voice actor, you could get 3 voices and 1 sound effect. Sort of odd, really. So you'll do 2 voices, Peter calling, you'll do this and that. Oh, I need a sound effect, Peter. And so you get something. And but once they came in, they were just ripping, and it was just such a joy, because Peter was in, we developed the character by their voices, they sold us their sounds. Once they started understanding the characters, I can do this, and I keep citing Peter Cullen, because Peter Cullen was a guy, and he's got countless credits, I mean, movies and all kinds of stuff, but Peter Cullen would be out, like, you know, at that time it was okay to smoke in the lounge, but he'd be smoking away and stuff, and, you know, he was a whiskey drinker and stuff, and I'd be like, and Peter, it's like, how do you think I keep my voice so rough? And he was smoking cigarettes and drinking whiskey, not on the job, drinking anyway, but it was really something where, because what we were doing is we were fitting scenes, and so everything was on the stopwatch. So we had these professionals, and it did pay off. We had them come in, and you could say to any of them, BJ Ward, I can go down the whole list, I got them up here because I just want to make sure everybody remembers who they are. And you would say, I need a lot more energy, but I need you to take another second and a half to say it. So think about that. You have to be much more excited about saying something, but you need to take longer to say it. It's a mismatch.
So one thing to keep in mind, for those of you out there who don't already know, because the voice actors were recorded to a pre-existing video track, even though editing was available to retime things, because of the time pressure, the actors were usually recorded to a stopwatch. Is that right?
To a tenth of a second.
Isn't that something?
I could say to somebody, Michael Bell, you know, Michael, I need another take of that. I need just a tenth of a second shorter. Well, you know, you'd really say to yourself, what is a tenth of a second to a voice actor? And I don't actually think they knew. I think we would just keep taking takes, and we'd get there. Oh, great, perfect, good. Okay, we buy that take next, and we just, you know, keep going. Yeah, it was. But one of the great delights is working with them. They were very professional, very proud of what they were doing, and it was really fun again to sort of be under this little bit of a thing. The Japanese, you know, what we're the retread people. Because when these folks, I keep saying guys, but BJ Ward also, but when they were going around town, what do you work at Voltron? They're like, you know, and they'd be like, wait till you see it, you know? And then it turned to everybody right away, and they're like, oh my God, what do these guys do? And those voices really, as we all see and witness, they gave us this foundation for something of really believable characters that could really, really imbue the characters that were being written and shown. So it was a great joy, and I'll tell one other little weird thing, but you know, if you don't mind, I know you can like give me this.
I am not going to do that.
But you know, LA's a car town,
you
right?
Can talk
so
all afternoon.
so we'd be in the studio, and in LA they had, you know, the studios had kitchens. Some of them had chefs. They were really nice, really. I mean, so anyways, we're there, and we're just in a little recording booth. You know, it's like me, you're my associate director, and then right there is, you know, the performer. They're right there at a podium, you know, with a microphone and headphones on, one at a time. And so we're hanging out in the kitchen. Yeah, how's it going? You know, Peter's out smoking a cigarette and you know, talking. So I'm standing with Michael Bell and Lenny Weinrib. And again, look these people up. They're just amazing. Michael Bell, you all wouldn't know it, but he was the voice of something called Parquet Margarine. And this the longest running.
Flavor says butter.
Butter. And then Parquet. And that was him. And it was, I think this thing ran like 15 or 20 years. Michael had two places, one in Palos Verdes, which is south of Los Angeles, this nice sort of peninsula in the Santa Monica Bay, that he called Butter Estates. He had a place up in Santa Barbara, right? A ranch called Rancho Residuales. I think had so many residuals. So, anyways, but I'm standing there and just listening. I'm thinking, these guys are driving up in like Plymouth Valiants and you know, just little Chevys and stuff. I was like, wow, for such a car. I mean, I know from us these people are making a couple $100,000 a year, and I believe they're probably making like $500,000 a year because they're doing Budweiser commercials and movies and all this stuff. And so I just, you know, I'm in the parking lot, see them come in. I'm like, it's so funny. They're just, you know, being such a car town, you'd think these guys would have really nice cars. I'm standing there, and Michael Bell and Lenny Weinrib are chatting, and Lenny was like, I think he was like, you know, Barney on the Flintstones. Again, just look at their credits, it's wonderful. But anyway, so Michael Bell looks at Lenny and says, you know, so Lenny, you still have your Bentley? And he goes, oh no, I sold my Bentley, I got a Rolls Royce. And you know, they start talking about cars, and I'm like, oh, these are their bumper cars. These guys just drive around these crummy little Plymouth Valiants just to go to the recording studios. Like, oh yeah. And I will say that the Christmas presents I got from these people were almost embarrassing, you know, just because they you know, I was somebody who helped them, you know, make a lot of money. But the talent they brought, it's the thing that as I rank Voltron up so high, just working with them and just the professionalism and the dedication to a character, and they went away and they used their vocal cords to know the script, know the character. They could come in from a Budweiser commercial, driving from another studio from a Budweiser commercial over here, and like that be in character, and to the 10th of a second.
Amazing.
So yeah, it was really cool.
So did you, because you didn't cross paths much with Frank Lakova, did you guys work, I assume you worked in entirely separate facilities? Or maybe the same recording studio?
We worked in different recording studios, but we worked in the same editing studios, and then we ultimately didn't work in the same mixing studios because we both needed so much time.
Okay.
But the editing facility, which had multiple editing rooms, so we were working in different rooms at the same time. And it was funny, we were, I think, not to say we were competitive in a way, but we were sort of a little curious, what's he doing with that one over there? So, but in the end of the day, we didn't really have much time to do much, and Peter was wisely like, you guys don't worry about what anybody's doing, just here's your scripts, go get these scripts done, we gotta keep going here, so.
So how long was the time you spent? From the moment you were, was Tom Batista brought you onto Voltron, is that right?
I want to say that was like May of '84.
Okay, so
Yeah.
only about 4 months before the show premiered on television.
Yeah, well, I think I interviewed in May and they hired me in mid or late June, which by that time they should have had 10 episodes done. we hadn't even started.
And because you produced the earliest Lion episodes, it was you starring on the show that got those very first episodes out the door, which is amazing.
Yeah, I was really under the gun to sort of set, I guess I would say almost more an operational procedure to do stuff. It's like, let's get on with this, and because I had done a couple series already that had like 100 and some episodes, I knew process was important. And I've always been somebody, still to this day, it's what still my professional career, my sort of entrepreneurial pursuits is, I'm the person that likes to establish the environment in which the creative process takes place. So I'm not the most creative person, I'm not the writer, I'm not a director, but I like to get into that. I'm sort of the person that stands between Martians and Earthlings. When people are, like in the music business, that's really what it is. You have these unbelievable artists, music artists, but you got to get a TV show done. Right. So between managers and agents and music artists with all their well-deserved egos and stuff, you're sort of the guy in the middle. Say, okay, everybody, we just got to get this done. So in that context, in the early stages, it was like I was very much of like, okay, are we ready? Can we start doing something? Yeah, can we? You want to use non-union voice actors? Okay, let me get some in. We'll try it out. Let me try to show you that maybe using union ones would be okay. So we were just constantly rolling along and just pushing. So it then got to the point where even in the post-production facilities, I would sit down with the management people and say, let me tell you how this has to work. Let me tell you how many editors, we're going to burn out your editors, so let me tell you how many editors you're going to need to cycle in with us. And then we found editors. I mean, of course, the editors wanted all the overtime they could get, but at a certain point when an editor's like, falling asleep at the keyboard, it's like, we got to get another editor in here. Because we were working, I really think it was like, I want to say it was like 6 days, like, I mean, I was sleeping on the couch in the editing room. It was really that and we knew if we just could get over that hump, get a few episodes ahead, then we'd be okay.
Give yourself some breathing room.
But we had no idea whether, and all of this is, it's what I always feel, I always wondered about, sort of Ted being at the top of it all saying, are we making any money yet? Does anybody care? Is this successful? Do they love it or hate it? So it was a nail biter the whole way, and God bless Ted and God rest his soul. He was in it to win it, and he was a very calm, mild-mannered guy that believed in it, and we can all be thankful that he did, because a lot of people. I mean, honestly, I actually had my doubts when I guess I'd gone through the interview process, because in the end of the day, part of it was if you didn't make your delivery with these TV stations, they're all independent TV stations, all their contracts say failure to deliver. If you fail to deliver, we can terminate this contract like without even notice. It's not like I can give you another couple of weeks. stuff. So that loomed large there for a bunch of weeks, and I think, other people would have said we're not going to make it, but they were committed to it. I mean, there was a lot of money already on the table, so it wasn't be like, yeah, let's forget this, we're not going to make it. It's like, oh my God, we got to make this.
So when you talk about making delivery, and I've heard that, I believe Franklin's used the phrase satellite downlink to get the content to the individual stations. How did that work? Was it, okay, all you stations who are syndicating Voltron, we are going to downlink this episode at a given day and time, and all of you hook your recording equipment up to that? Is that how that works?
Yeah, it's very interesting for people who are interested in that stuff, and probably completely boring for anybody.
But I mean, but this
we
is
were the uplink,
okay.
You were the downlink.
Okay,
so,
my apologies.
So, no, let's say, I believe ultimately there were 110, 115 stations that ultimately signed on to Voltron. They're all different stations, different places. And so we had a contract with a satellite uplink in Los Angeles. We would master the show, so we would, we'd go through, we'd get the scripts, record the voices, take the voices over to the editing facility. The other side would go to the music scoring, the really sound editing people. They were taking John Peterson's music and putting it in the right places.
Paul
Sound
Vitello
effects,
for sound
yep,
effects.
yep.
Yeah.
And sound effects. So Paul was like, he was. I actually thought we probably took 10 years off his life. Sound effects are like this long, at least music scores are there and stuff. But anyway, so we would get all this done. We'd mix it, we'd rough mix it, we'd listen to it. We would master it, because that's where you finally say all the levels. Some things are too high and too shrill, and bass is too much, and get into a certain thing. Lay it back onto the fully edited mixed master, and then take, at that time, a videotape to a satellite facility. And that satellite facility had a schedule. And like, okay, we're feeding you, and they would communicate to all the TV stations. Voltron episode 101 is going to be fed at 3 p.m. Pacific time on this certain day. And those people all in their station schedules of all the things going on at a local station said, okay, Voltron's coming down at 3 p.m. or if you're, let's say, on the East Coast, it's 6 p.m., set up to record that episode. They'd record the episode. Sometimes they would miss it. They'd, oh my God, and we'd be like, oh my God, we're gonna do a refeed. Sometimes we would, if we couldn't do a refeed for a few stations, you'd actually, overnight it. And that time FedEx wasn't, so obvious. But anyway, those were like operations people, network operations people that would solve those problems. But we were like, gotta get to this, and the facility, the satellite facility would insist on having the master. They say they'd like the 5 to 7 days in advance so they could quality control it. They could get it in their schedule to quality control all the things that were coming in to be fed up. And we'd be coming through the door and say, this is going out, the day after tomorrow. It's like, really? Okay, so yeah, that was like, I guess now you'd call it logistics, supply chain logistics stuff.
Yeah.
But it was harrowing for the people that were on that end of it. We were just trying to get the darn thing done and delivered. So.
And because this was, it was stripped or striped for, I don't know the term, for weekday syndication, 5 episodes a week, were the satellite uplinks done in batches of 5 or individual episodes? Or?
Not in the beginning, but ultimately that's the way it worked. So
okay.
you'd be basically spending, every episode was, I think, 24 minutes, 26 minutes, and the commercial breaks were, we programmed the commercial breaks in them. We put in the national sponsors, right? So if you look at a half hour of 30 minutes, generally speaking, you'd have, I think at that time it was 8 minutes of commercial breaks. So you'd basically take 3 commercial breaks in there, and then we put the national sponsors in,
okay.
right? We put in, Hasbro or Mattel or whoever it was, and then the stations, they had a log of exactly what time and what second their local toy store commercial would be put in and all the things they were doing. So
that's fascinating to see how that comes together.
The minutia of it, yeah.
That's amazing. So going back to voice actors, do you have any interesting stories to tell about folks such as Lenny Weiner, who really he's passed some 20 years ago, I believe now.
Yeah, in Santiago, Chile.
Yes.
He retired in Santiago, Chile.
Or anyone for that matter, but.
Well, I can tell, I guess I can tell more salacious stories on my music side than I can on this side.
We will eventually
I'll be at the bar
transition
later
to
talking about working with Dr. Dre if you want. I mean, Lenny was a gentleman, and he came to work in didn't wear a tie, but he wore a coat and stuff, and he was a portly guy, big guy, and he really was every bit the character. And actually, it seemed like all the characters he played, he was just that guy. And but he was just a lovely man. But he had an ego, and so he was always wanting to come a little early to listen to what everybody else was doing, and he was even trying to sort of improve his character voice. Like, no, Lenny, we locked that voice a couple of weeks ago. That's who you have to be now. And, well, but I think I can bring something else to it. Michael Bell was he was running a theater in West Los Angeles, so he was in the midst of all this. He was putting up shows, producing and directing, stage shows and stuff. So, but I don't really have anything. I mean, other than showing up and being very professional, wanting to talk about the characters, and Peter was amazing because he was somebody who you felt was always checking to make sure his voice was still there.
Speaking of which, you might want to take a drink. I know I have.
Am I getting raspy?
No, but not just for your own sake. I lose my voice.
Have a shot of whiskey.
I'm going to give you a quick side
Thank you.
story. At New York Comic Con 2016, I got to see Adam West, and someone asked him, this is just a few years before he passed, how he kept his voice sounding so youthful in those DC animated movies he was doing, and he went, gargling vodka.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
Yeah, it is. But Peter would be like chortling in the out in the kitchen. He'd be, I mean, I can't even do it justice, but he'd be somehow back in the throat. He'd be that like he was gargling vodka, I guess. But he was but it was his. My running joke was, oh, Peter just wanted to make sure his voice is still here. But it was part of what I think he was roughing up his vocal cords, because he got known as this guy. When you think of like Alien, or he did Aliens, he did all this stuff. He was somebody that just could reach deeper in his throat. But yeah, I mean, all the stories I have are sort of these charming, wonderful stories of these very sweet people being very sincere about being professional actors and voice actors. And we sometimes talk about, I'd ask him, I said, it must be so great being, I would say a successful voice actor, but like, a voice actor succeeding financially really, really well, and go to anywhere you want, and nobody goes, hey, you're Michael Bell, would you sign an autograph? Nobody knew who they were, so they had this freedom of movement that other actors who were making lots of money and successful didn't have.
That is
And they
fascinating.
loved it. Yeah. They knew what they had.
So you had talked about, and this was all new to me when you mentioned the character that you were trying to get into animation, the character was Sharpie, right? And then Voltron happened. As far as I'm aware, that's the only animation credit that you have. Can you tell me what happened as Voltron was coming to a close, and how did the path proceed for you from there?
Do we have to talk about this, Greg?
You don't have to. You don't have to.
Well, it broke my heart a bit, because I loved it, and I had thought to myself, God, if Voltron could run for 5 years, this would be like, I wouldn't ask for anything else in my career. But in LA, it was really tough. I mean, obviously my very first pitch was Sharpie the Garden Sage, got nowhere. And it was a bit of a reality check. And honestly, I would never have gotten into it if the unlikely characters of Ted Koppler and Peter Keefe and this guy Tom Batista, who I knew from before, had pulled me into it. I could never have broken into it. And after that, I couldn't break into it. I had actually thought to myself, hey, I'm from one of the top rated cartoon series. I mean, the #1, cartoon series. But a lot of people still were, they took the, then it went from like, they're trying to do the Japanese overdubbed retread, to, oh my God, they did it. To, then everybody else stepped up their game, and I couldn't get back in. And then I got some other opportunities, and I just had to go with it. So that's how I started more on the music side.
That's totally understandable. It's fascinating to me that obviously you brought a skill set from a non-animation background and very successfully created amazing animation on the post-production side.
I did my part. There was a a lot of,
Well,
it
yes.
took a village, but yeah.
Well, sure, but you were very much a key villager in that village.
thank
So
you.
that is it possible that because you were working with the very unique circumstances that brought you in, that maybe it wasn't kind of a mainstream Hanna-Barbera
Yeah.
path? You know,
Yeah,
I'm just using them as an example.
Yes. Thank you for being my psychiatrist. Yes, that was, that is what I assessed out of it too.
I would have you sit down on the couch and tell me about it, but you don't have a couch.
Yeah, and I need to give me my medication, I'll be on my way. That was my assessment. I just couldn't find my way back into, I tried to sniff around to Hanna-Barbera and a bunch of the others, but they were all, well established, and we were the indies, so yeah, so I had to get on with my career life, so I did, and I have to say I got seduced by the music business, which is
So
a
let's
lot
talk
of
about
fun.
that. Let's talk about the music business. Moving on from Voltron. How did those next steps come about? And I do remember writing some questions down about the U.S. festival and other. Was this a starting point for you, or what was that?
The US Festival gave me some credit in the music business. That was 1983, so I actually came off of that onto Voltron.
Okay.
And the US Festival was Steve Wozniak, right? Steve Jobs' partner.
And Apple. Yep.
And Apple. And the US Festival was Unite Us in Song. And Steve Wozniak they were on their way. They were making tons and tons of money, and this was a heart-driven project for him. And so he set about to take over a park in San Bernardino, California, and have one of the biggest music festivals at the time in America. And it was all about Unite Us in Song. He even did a live link, dare I say, with Russia. We did a live jazz duets and stuff. Jazz artists there and here. That was like the sideshow. But that festival was like, if you look at the artists in this festival, but that was another, hair-raising experience, because we were, in a park where nothing had been done. They built an exit off the freeway to get into the park. It's so big, and he had so much money he could do it. And that it was 4 days over 2 weekends. So it was there was sort of the new music, rock music, and then sort of the sort of mid-range music, and then country day. And this guy had enough money that it had every major artist that there was. Wow. I mean, everyone. We had David Bowie. We had Van Halen. Those were sort of the closing acts of the shows. Motley Crue. The countryside was Willie Nelson, sort of my fantasy day, because I love country music. And but even like the Van Halen one was it was crazy, because it's 1983. Drugs, sex, and rock and roll weren't deadly yet, so there was a lot of that going on. And there was, I had a crew. We were just in trailers, construction trailers at the site, and we had all these big bands rolling in, and they didn't care about us, and we had to care about them. And I always remember that one of the many odd things that happened. Van Halen had in their it's called a hospitality rider. Every band has they have a technical rider for all the technical stuff they need, lights and sound and all this stuff, but then they have this hospitality rider of what they need. And so although I was the supervising producer, I had people responsible for fulfilling the hospitality riders as well as everything else. And they had stuff in their hospitality riders. It was like 10 pounds of M&Ms, no brown ones.
I've heard about that.
And it's true. And
It's
so
amazing. I
I couldn't get out of my head. I'm like, did these guys really want a bunch of strangers handling all their M&Ms and separating brown ones out? Do you really want a bunch of people? So I couldn't get past that. But on the rest of the list was, a case of vodka, a case of this, a case of that. I mean, it was just like an obscene amount of stuff, of which they just, if they didn't drink it all, which they did a pretty good job at drinking it all. I mean, there was in the case of Van Halen, they had a little compound that was built for them. They rode their tour bus in and had chain link fence all around it, and it was scary, because I didn't actually think they'd be able to get up on the stage. David Lee Roth, he was so blasted, and we're like, can he walk? Well, we do. We can't remember the stage. Can he sing? And anyways, he came out. He was like, and he performed, he kicked into character. But twice during the show, I'm sorry to say this, but twice during the show, we're following with cameras. If he runs off stage and he vomits on the side of the stage and comes right back out, and he's performing, and we're just like, oh.
Wow.
And when we were editing their show, they were, all the artists had approval of their edits, which was a nightmare. Well, the bigger artists did. The smaller artists were like, you don't have any approval. We're going to make it, and you'll take it what it is. But they were the ones who came into the editing facility and together. And it was just like, oh my God. And I actually had an arrangement with the security guard at the editing facility, and I would say to him, I said, listen, if I don't come back out in 10 minutes, can you just come in and say, Mr. Sterling, you have an urgent call, can you come out? Because I just need to be able to get out of the room from them. And we're finishing this thing at this particular facility, have the editing machines, all the video machines here, and we're sort of editing here on a big screen, and they're all hanging around, and they're just and we had cake and stuff, and anyways, they got into a food fight in the editing room and threw food that went into the editing machine and shredded the master tape. I'm like, really? So it was fun stuff.
So you've worked with what was the company, Base Hologram?
Base Hologram, yeah.
Okay.
That's a current project. I've got now what I do is I get involved with different companies and different people. I'm not the 0 to 40 guy. I don't really start with people that have nothing. I start with people that have done something to demonstrate what they're doing. So I'm a partner with some people out of London who do very high-tech magic. They do lasers and holograms and stuff. And so they had established themselves, and now I have gotten them shows in the U.S. and getting their company going. And I've had half a dozen shows up in Las Vegas, and I tied up with a guy I had known from Clear Channel Entertainment, which became Live Nation. He formed Base Hologram, and so we replicate artists in hologram form, and we project them on a screen, and it's very, very lifelike. Excuse me. So Whitney Houston, they started with Maria Callas, the great opera diva, because that was easy to do. You just asked the Maria Callas estate, can we replicate Maria Callas? Yes, please, would you? Same with Roy Orbison, Buddy Holly. So those are the beta tests, and then we moved on to Whitney Houston because that was a pretty high stakes thing, and that just wrapped up a run in Las Vegas a couple months ago, and it's doing well. Now we're doing this hologram dinosaur show for the museum. I'm really turning it more toward all family stuff. So I have a stake in the company, and I'm involved in display holograms as well, which are these physical devices and stuff. And I've liked any kind of technology that either enhances or differentiates something in entertainment.
Such as stereo for Voltron.
Such as stereo for Voltron.
So with that technological interest, what are some of the technologies that either you've contributed to or been a part of, or just across the industry, things you may not have had your hands on? What are some of these technologies that excite you the most, and why?
Well, right now, I go back to other stuff that I did and put weird twists on things. Right now, I think this hologram stuff I really like it a lot. It's about the shared experience. It's not VR or AR. You can sit in a room, with hundreds or thousands of people and actually share the experience. Where VR, we put on headsets and we wouldn't see anybody.
Walk into a wall.
Which is great for home. But stuff now I see, like I'm working with a company that does facial replacement. So you can begin to alter faces and stuff, and it really, really works. Real-time animation manipulation, where you can take somebody, it's not even motion capture anymore, it's just, you can just read them, and you can now change them into like a cartoon character or anything, and then whatever they do will show up. So you don't even need all this motion capture stuff. That's just really coming to the forefront. And these are companies I always sort of, snoop around with and stuff, and what are you guys doing and stuff. So I've got in the one hologram, not Base Hologram, but a different hologram company that does the actual physical displays. We're developing with AWS,
Amazon Web Services.
Thank you.
Cloud service provider.
It's called Hologram Concierge, where you can walk up to it, and with AI, it'll allow you to pick. We're talking to cruise ship business and hotels now. You can pick a concierge character or an IP, any IP you want, where you can pick that character, and then it has a camera. It will recognize your face. So every time you walk up to it, it will show you who you pick to be your concierge. So you can say, you know, it'll welcome you if you said, you know, call me Steve or call me Mr. Sterling, it'll remember that. And when you walk up, it'll read your face, it'll know who you are, and it'll say, if I said, you know, hi Steve, how can I help you? I'd say, I'd like to make reservations at a restaurant, or I'd like to order something or buy something. It'll go back and forth with you, and it's not quite seamless in this personal yet, but I think in another year it will be, and I think it's going to be really interesting.
That's fascinating. So
Yeah.
when I first heard that you had some involvement in holographic technology, my mind as a science fiction geek immediately goes back to Star Trek: The Next Generation with the holodeck. You know, you walk in, there's this amazing immersive reality, and as you talked about with the concierge, I was thinking of the very first episode of that show where one of the characters is walking down the corridor of the Enterprise asking how to get to the holodeck. And as he's walking around, the computer pops on the screen in the hallway and says, now turn to the left, or something like that. It knows where he's at and it's helping him out. But the concierge idea, how fascinating.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Wow.
It's going to be interesting. And you know, that other company I mentioned that I was getting into virtual goods with, we had developed one of the software patents I'm a co-inventor on. We had developed something that they call an idea graph. But the idea was that, it got patented. It just stuck at this other company. I can't get it back. But was that with emojis, you could, like, if you were a Dunkin', if I said coffee, you know, now if you know, in your texting, it says coffee, it just shows you a coffee cup. Mm-hmm. And we have a patent, well, now this other company owns the patent, of branded emojis.
Oh,
so we could set it up so that, like, let's say if I was a Starbucks guy and you were a Dunkin' guy for coffee, you would, if you chose to register yourself as that, you know, your favorite brands, your Dunkin' Donuts, Budweiser beer, you know, whatever products that you had an affinity for, or it could recognize that. But if you register with it, and same with me, if I send you a text saying coffee, for you it would show up as Dunkin' Donuts, Dunkin' coffee. So I could send you a thing and say, hey Greg, you want to go have a coffee? And it would show you Dunkin'. And I would then be going to meet you at Dunkin' for a coffee. You wouldn't be coming to Starbucks with me if you sent me one. So it's called an idea graph, and I just thought that was going to be so big. But it got, you know, we sold our company to another company, didn't make a lot of money. They were going to take it way up, and then they fell apart, and they were not very nice people, so they weren't giving it back to us. My wife keeps saying, you know, you got to go back and get that back from them, but they're just such bad people. They'll just want so much money, you can't get there. But that's also an example. I do want to say to everybody, leave it. You know, if anything, I want to be the example of you know, following some passion and having perseverance and just really continuing to just believe something's going to come of what you're thinking about. In the end of the day, as my kids will attest, my daughter's here, you know, if 1 out of 10 things happened, it was great. But you're swinging at stuff a lot. And I chose a really difficult business to be in, but I love it. But in the end of the day, a lot of the tests about perseverance. I mean, particularly like Hollywood has a very cruel way of testing how much do you believe in what you're doing. You gotta be very resilient about no, and you gotta say, listen, I'm looking for one yes. That's all I'm looking for, but I gotta keep going. And so I think that, you know, to me, the message I always want to say to people is, you got to persevere. You got to be in a position to just, you know, and it's really hard. And so I always want everybody to know, if you come up with a thought or a dream or a desire or something, not to say you can always will it to happen, but the test of how much you believe in that dream is, are you willing to just keep at it? And not to the exclusion of everything else, but just, you know, find your way forward with it. And I just think that's an important thing to know. And then the other thing I always loved about Voltron was that it's the classic story of good versus evil. And we all are, I mean, listen, we deal with good versus evil all the time, and God knows it's all over the media in every way possible. But, you know, we like to think that good triumphs over evil. And let's face it, in our own everyday lives, we're all dealing with good versus evil, and even what we're doing or not doing, or who we're doing it with and stuff. And I think that the thing I liked about Voltron was that, yes, it was a slash and gash, cartoon series, but it was also, I always felt that if there is any social significance to it, it was leaving us all with this message of, good does have a reason to triumph over evil. And the fact that we made these really rich characters in an unlikely way, allow people to sort of just take in this sort of fantasy play of, yeah, this is, somebody's out there gonna take care of evil for me. So it's those are sort of the two messages I feel like I always want to be able to tell people.
Well, you just answered the last question I was going to have in my list.
Sorry.
No, I'm not griping at all, but we're down to about 15 minutes. I want to ask you one uber nerdy question about Voltron, and then I'd like to open the floor to Q&A from the audience if we might. Again, going back to the whole lion versus vehicle thing, do you remember that being a big deal if you're in the recording session with somebody and you've got a cast member and okay, you're doing this script and you've got all these lion characters, all these vehicle characters, and you might one day be doing a lion show, the other day doing a vehicle show, and the different voices that the actors had to do were varied, right? I mean,
Yeah.
B.J. Ward was known for Allura and Hagar and Nanny, and then assorted other characters, Ramel. And in the vehicle show, she did all the female characters, Ginger, Cinda, Lisa, and various other characters. Did the actors remember their performances, or did they have to be reminded? Because they had so many characters for not just Voltron, but everything else. And if they didn't remember, did you guys remember, or were there references? If they're coming back a week
It's
later.
a really good question.
how does that work?
I love that question. Like you're really getting below the surface here. We had sounds of every character, and we would play them their voice back.
Okay.
So BJ, now we're doing whichever character, we'll play it to you, and they would, just like an instrument, they would tune themselves up. We'd play it back a few times. We all picked certain a number of seconds of a voice of a character, and we had it all lined up. We could just play it. So okay, BJ Ward, come on in, BJ, yeah, sit down. Here's and they were getting the script a little advanced, but not that much. But yeah, we would play them back. We would tune them up. We would tune their voices with what they had recorded previously, so that we could make sure that they were going to be in sync. And they would be there with like, they would. When we played it back to them, they would speak over it, and we would go back and forth. It took minutes. It wasn't like a big deal.
Sure.
Like that. Oh yeah, okay, great. I remember. Because again, they were coming from doing a home goods commercial or something, and they were okay. Remind me who I am.
I often wondered that, because you got live action actors.
That's a really good question.
Doing a sitcom where they're there 5 days a week for months on end doing a season of shows, but in animation, you're everywhere.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
fascinating.
And you really have a lot of different range in your vocal cords and stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
that's a good one.
you answered so many of my questions and more, and I thank you for that.
Oh,
This has been a tremendous honor. So, if you're okay with it, I'd like to get some questions from the audience. Does anybody have any questions for Steve?
Come on, bring it on.
What did you major in college?
I went to Marquette University, and initially I had no idea what I wanted to do, so I just picked business administration. And then it was the second semester there. There was a job posting for the media department. And I was a work study student, so I was looking for a job, and I went over there. And when I went through it, I was like, wow, look at all this stuff. What school is this? And so that was it was communications at the time. And it just because I had taken a couple semesters of business, my senior year, my advisor said, hey, you have all these business, you would get a double major in business and communications. So I came out of school with a double major in business and communications production.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So my mentor told me, because in my senior year, of course, all my parents' friends were saying, oh, Steve, what are you going to do when you graduate? I'm like, well, I don't really know, but. My mentor told me that if you think you really want to be in the entertainment business, you got to go to New York or LA. I grew up in Pennsylvania, so New York seemed closer. So I went there. It took me 6 months to get a job. I still have like 155 rejection letters that people thank you for your interest, but no. Then I just got in as a clerk in a revenue analysis department, only because I had business credits. Didn't care anything about that. Then I had to work my way over to the production side. So yeah.
Because I've noticed that regardless of what you major in, it's the experience that you bring, and you had the business credits.
Yeah.
Because going to a market like New York, when I graduated from college, I went to the DC area, and they don't want to touch you if you don't have, 5 to 10 years of experience in a given field.
Yeah, that's the hard part. Yeah, I mean, it's really like, I just know from my own kids, they're pressured to get internships like, right away, and I was like, wow, I was working in a factory between college jobs and just, trying to, in college I was doing things, it was, but yeah, it's very more challenging today than ever. Yeah.
Anyone else? Questions for Steve?
It's not a big question, it's more of a comment. I've been a fan of Voltron since '84. I was trying to explain to someone who's not into the Voltron as well, because everyone comments about hidden voice in the original. And I said to them, you do realize there were 5 voice actors in the original.
I'm sorry, can you speak up? I'm not.
I'm gonna take my microphone back there.
Oh, good, yeah.
Okay,
In fact, come on up.
I'll come forward, because I'm not in my giant blue circle. Sorry. No, what I was saying was, I have a friend who got into the series Voltron fandom, thank you, with the newest version, Legendary Defender. And I've been a fan of it since '84, when I was a teenager. And they were talking about how Pidge's voice drove them up the wall, and I said to them, you do realize, maybe you don't, the original series were 5 voice actors that did everything.
Yeah.
I said, the voice of Keith is the voice of Pidge. What? I said, yeah. I said, could you imagine talking to yourself in the booth? I can. And I explained that today you've got thousands of voice actors. Back then, you didn't have as many. So you've got to give props to those people with the amount of voices. Like B.J. Ward did 3 voices at least.
Yeah.
And people don't understand that. So I think they not only led the way with Voltron being a stereo show and being one of the first shows of the giant robot genre on American television, they led the way in voice acting.
Yeah.
To make it become a craft.
Yeah,
So,
it's good of you to see it that way, because as I say, the scale for Union was 3 voices in one sound effect. Now, we could get them to do an additional voice, which we did, then a little scale upgrade, which was inconsequential at the time, but yeah, those voice actors really brought something.
So I'm incredibly thankful to you and to everyone else who brought the original Voltron together. Because
Well, thank you for that.
as a teenager, it meant a lot to me because I was an outcast.
That's so
And
cool.
it meant so much to me. I mean, I was made fun of, you watch cartoons, you watch that M crap. And I would be like, hey, it's my outlet.
Yeah, good for you. Yeah, no, exactly, and that's what I say is, I started. It's humbling being here, because what's fantastic is, first off, in Indiana, sort of a crossroads state, right? Here we are. There's this core, and I thank Kevin and Patrick and Greg here for just keeping this alive, and all of you, because it. Listen, I was driving down the street in LA, seeing kids with wood sticks chasing each other, yelling Voltron Force, and I'm just seeing stuff that was beginning to happen on a scale that was really like, we were getting 25,000 letters. Kids were writing in letters saying, what fuel does Voltron use? And of course, I give it to the writers and say, can you answer this kid's letter? And they're like, what?
It's a game changer.
What was the metal? But you're a perfect example of somebody who was just, you were hearing something and believing in it and buying into it. And I could only ever hope that it was a good influence on you. And but it was, it is something that is very humbling. Yeah.
Just a tidbit, because I know people have something to say. My very first ball gown was Voltron. I wanted to make it since I was 14 years old. And when Legendary Defender came along, I was like, I'm doing that. And that got me the nickname of Mom Voltron. I was given the nickname at a convention, at a photo shoot. I was standing there like, hey, Mama Voltron, come back into the picture.
Yeah.
And it stuck.
Yeah,
So
good for you.
it's a huge influence on me,
Good.
and my car is the Red Lion.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I like it a little bit, just a little.
Yeah,
And I
that's
even have a
great.
tattoo and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, good for
thank you.
No,
We
that's
like you a whole lot.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I love what you're doing with your fabric right there. It's cool.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
bed
Marika.
sheets.
I know we're running very close on time, and Bob's next, but does anybody else have any other questions or comments before we wrap up?
I want to say I'm much more eager to hear what Bob has to say. You're a missing link for me, so.
All right, well,
Thank you,
all
everybody.
for
Thanks.
joining us. Please join everyone. The Voltron Defender continues with Bob Cobb in just a few moments. Thank you.